ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So we are seeing here, Maitreya Rishi further describes the transcendental Leela of the Lord, where the Lord, after being worshipped by all the great sages and transcendentalists of the higher planets, then touched the earth with his hooves and then placed it on the water. So the earth was lifted from the bottom from Garbhodaka ocean, and after lifting it, the Lord placed it on the top of the water. So, in the purport, Prabhupada explains about the inconceivable potency of the Lord, that how the Lord placed the earth on the top of the water and it was floating by the inconceivable potency of the Lord. So, it is just like the Vedic literatures describe that millions and millions of planets are floating in the air like the cotton swab. So just like you take some cotton and you throw it in air and it is floating in the air. So like that, millions of such planets are floating in the sky by the inconceivable potency of the Lord. We may call it by varieties of name and try to describe. This happens by gravitational pull. This happens by varieties of forces which are acting, and that is how the planets are in their own place and they are suspended in the air like this in their own orbits. So Prabhupada explains that actually we may give varieties of explanations for so-called scientific explanations for all these different leelas of the Lord, but actually they are inconceivable to our tiny brain. So Prabhupada says, these frog-like philosophers, they may give some imaginary explanations about this, but factually all these are made possible by the inconceivable potency of the Lord. And then the Lord, after placing the earth in its place like this, then the Lord once again went back. Apsunyasa yayau harihi. The Lord, yayau means returned back to his own abode. So in that, Prabhupada explains about that how the Lord descends. It is said here the Lord descended as an avatar. Avatar means the Lord is existing in his varieties of forms in the spiritual world. But the Lord descends to this earth for some particular purpose. So, when the Lord descends, he is called avatar. Whenever the Supreme Lord or any of his devotees with the Lord, just like when the Lord descended personally as Krishna, along with him Arjuna and many other pure devotees also descended. The devotees in Vrindavan, So Prabhupada explains, neither the Lord is ordinary, nor the devotees of the Lord who come with the Lord, who descend with the Lord, are ordinary. They're all transcendental. The activities performed by the Lord, the activities performed by the devotees of the Lord, they're all transcendental. So they're all subject matter for devotees to glorify. Because the most important reason for the Lord to descend as an avatar, we will find it in the next verse, very beautifully explained. If one hears and describes in devotional service attitude this auspicious narration of Lord bore, which is worthy of description, the Lord who is within the heart of everyone is very pleased. So actually, the real reason for the descent of the Lord is not just these varieties of purposes, but a chance given to the devotees, a chance given to the conditioned soul to glorify the Supreme Lord, in order to remember the activities of the Supreme Lord. Because factually, that is the most important principle which is to be attained in this human form of life. The whole Bhagavatam is practically based on the principles of how Parikshit Maharaj remembered the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the end of his life. How he molded his life, the balanced days which were left with him, in such a way that he was able to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quit his body, remembering the Supreme Lord. So, these various avatars of the Lord gives us a chance to mold our life in such a way that we can describe, we can remember, we can glorify such beautiful pastimes of the Lord. And factually, at the end of our life, we are able to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead and leave this world. That is the highest perfection which one can attain in this human form of life. So, this is the most important reason for which the Lord actually descends, to leave a subject matter for us to glorify Him, to remember Him, and so that we can make our life perfected by that. One devotee around 15 years back, when we were in our Bangalore temple, in the old temple, when the construction for the new temple was just beginning, it was just going on. So he was describing that how one devotee was diagnosed with blood cancer, and then he was admitted in the hospital, and then he went to see the hospital, one of the very famous hospital in Bangalore. I think it was Kidwai Hospital. It's quite a famous cancer hospital. Just like here we have in Navanagar, that cancer hospital. Parthasarthi must have experience of going to that hospital many times because of his father. So, one devotee was diagnosed with blood cancer and he was admitted. And he was saying that how he had imagined that, because cancer is very terrible disease, practically, which even till today we find that the person who is diagnosed with cancer, very soon he dies. And practically there is no medicine till today, which is... So, the devotee was thinking that, the whole hospital must be filled with patients and everybody, with agony and pain. They must be all, So that is the kind of scene he was imagining before visiting the hospital. And then when he visited, he saw that the whole ward of that hospital was all completely empty. So he was surprised. He was thinking that, what is this? Maybe looks like that science has quite advanced and very few patients are there in the hospital, who are suffering from this cancer disease, and practically all the beds were empty. So he was wondering that what is this thing, whether patients are there or not. But then he saw that actually everybody, they had all gone out from their bed and they had all assembled in one hall where they had placed one television, and everybody was glued to the television set, and some cricket match was going on, and when the person is putting one shot and everybody is shouting, so much encouraged people were. So the devotee was revealing that how material world, the influence of Maya is so great that the person, these people, they are not ordinary patients. You see, people who are in cancer ward, they are all admitted because of this terminal disease called cancer. Probably few may be on the early stage, but most of them, are diagnosed of the cancer when it has already reached certain stage, and after that it is not practical at all, even with all kind of therapies, chemotherapy or this kind of therapy. So more or less they are all knowing very well that maybe few months, few days are left for me. You see? But the illusion is so great that in spite of knowing very well I am terminally ill, I am going to die maybe in another few months or maximum few years, in spite of that, they have not become serious in their life. In spite of that, they are all still thinking of enjoying some cricket match or some kind of entertainment, still in that hospital, in that horrible place where, the place of suffering. He is still trying to make some kind of entertainment for himself. So this is a sad state of affairs, that people are not trained up in their life to understand that at least at the end of life we should be trying to remember the Supreme Lord and leaving this body. But of course, this is not some mental exercise that, somehow by some kind of gymnastic or some kind of trick we will be able to remember the Supreme Lord at the point of death. It is not like that. It is a state of mind which one has to reach, which it is described in the Vedic literature as Ante Narayana Smriti. The perfection of life, which is called as Ante Narayana Smriti. It is not that in one instant we will be able to remember. You see, how we have molded our life. The devotee was saying that when he saw this, he was thinking that, he was feeling for these people that why they are not able to understand. The real goal of life is to remember the Lord. At least their end of these few years or few months which are left, they could well utilize by remembering, by chanting the holy name of the Lord. And still they are glued to some television, some entertainment, all these things. But then he was saying that actually, it is not that just by in the end of the life a person is simply able to remember the Lord. No. Throughout the life, how he has cultured his consciousness, that is what decides what the person is glued to, what the person is inclined to. Isn't it? The person is not inclined to hear and chant the holy name of the Lord at that point of life, because he has never practiced that in whole of his life. So actually, that stage of consciousness is cultured throughout our whole life. And then it is possible to come to that stage of life where we can remember Krishna at the end of our life. So, all these different kinds of incarnations of the Lord, all this spiritual subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam, the activities of the devotees, the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His various incarnations, all these are meant for all of us to gradually culture our consciousness so that we can come to the stage of that stage of consciousness where we can always remember Krishna. You see? So, that's how Rupa Goswami has given that most important principle, that always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. Why that principle is given? Because if we mold our life in such a way that whatever activities we are doing, we are reading, we are attending Bhagavatam class, what is the reason for this? We should all analyze. Actually, the main purpose of this is what? Why am I attending this Bhagavatam class? Why am I attending this Kirtan? Why am I attending all these things? The whole idea is to gradually culture our consciousness so that at one point it will come to the stage where always we will be able to remember Krishna. So, if it has to be cultured, then we have to be very, very conscious about it. We have to be very, very serious about it. You see? So, we find that in the prayers of Kunti Maharani, that how Kunti Maharani is praying to the Lord, that my dear Lord, you are supreme, powerful, you have inconceivable potencies, and it is by your supreme power, by your inconceivable potency, Kunti Maharani is praying that my dear Lord, kindly trim this tie which I have got with my kinsmen. So very beautiful prayer by Kunti Maharani. She says, Ataha Vishvesha Vishvatman Vishvamurte Swakeshu me. So she is addressing the Lord as Vishva Isha, Vishva Atman, O Lord of the universe, O soul of the universe. Vishva Murte, O personality of universal form. Swakeshu me, unto my own kinsmen. Sneha Pasham Imam Chindi. Please sever the tie which I have got for my own kinsmen. So actually, this should be the prayers of the devotees, that the Supreme Lord, who is Vishwa Isha, who is the Lord of the universe, the powerful Lord of the universe, controller of the universe, Vishwa Atman, who is the soul of the universe, Vishva Murte, who is the personality of universal form. So Kunti Maharani is praying to that Supreme Lord of the universe, that with His inconceivable potency, He should sever the tie. Sneha Pasham Imam Chindi. Chindi means to sever, to trim, to cut off the tie. So actually that is how our consciousness has to be gradually cultured. We have to pray to the Lord that even though we have taken to devotional service, our mind is into so many different varieties of attachments in this material world, isn't it? So we pray to the Lord that kindly with your inconceivable potency, cut off this tie of affection for varieties of affection which we have got in this material world, even though we may have taken to Krishna consciousness. And then further, she is saying, in the next prayer she says, Tvai me ananya vishaya matir madhupate askrit Ratim udvadha adha gange vogam udanvati. And then she is praying that let my mati Prabhupada explains, let my attention. Now what is happening? Our attention is to so many subject matter, isn't it? To varieties of subject matter, with our family, with our different kinds of things. Our mind is attached to different kinds of subject matter. So Kunti Maharani is saying, what she is praying to the Lord is, with your inconceivable potency, O all-powerful Lord, cut off this affection. And then where this affection should go? So then she is praying that Ananya Vishaya, let unalloyed, in unalloyed manner. That means without being diverted to any other subject matter. Ananya Vishaya, Matihi, let my attention, let my consciousness, O Madhupate, O Lord of Madhu, Askrit, let it be continuously. Askrit means without stoppage, continuously. Ratim utvadhat adha. Let my consciousness, my mati overflow continuously with your attraction. So she is saying, O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrances, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. So, it is a question of this rati. It is a question of this attraction. And this attraction is not possible just in one day. This is what we have to understand. See, this attraction is possible by culturing. And this whole sadhana bhakti is actually meant for culturing our consciousness, so that gradually we will be able to attain this rati, this attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So once we attain this rati, that point of time our consciousness will be able to remember Krishna always. Then we don't have to worry, particularly at the point of death, have to remember Krishna. See? Because once our attraction is there, it's automatically, you see, just like when our mind is attracted. As I was thinking about that incident the devotee was telling, that why those people are so much glued to the television, because their attraction is there, isn't it? So whereas if our attraction is towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we have to increase our attractions to chanting, to reading Srila Prabhupada books, to attending Kirtan, to attending Srimad Bhagavatam class. These directions we have to increase our attraction towards. And this is not just possible like that, it is possible gradually with culture. So these programs in Krishna consciousness, what Prabhupada has given, is meant to culture our consciousness, meant to shape our consciousness, gradually to come to the point of Ante Narayana Smriti. So all these different pastimes of the Lord, what the Lord is performing, is to give us a chance to perform varieties of devotional service, glorifying the pastimes of the Lord, hearing the pastimes of the Lord, remembering the pastimes of the Lord, so that we can gradually come to the point of remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at that time, when we quit our body, we will be able to remember the Supreme Lord factually. And Rupa Goswami explains that this kind of consciousness, how it has to be cultured. He says there are 6 very important principles which are very essential when we are performing sadhana bhakti. So when we are performing, when we are trying to culture our consciousness to come to the point of Ante Narayana Smriti, these 6 principles have to be followed very rigidly. So one, he says, is that we should learn to lead our life according to the directions given in the scriptures, according to the directions given by Krishna. So Prabhupada explains it like that things which are favorable in Krishna consciousness, we should learn to accept. We have to learn to lead our life according to the directions given in the scriptures. And then another important principle is, we must be ready to renounce anything which is not favorable in Krishna consciousness. So those principles, those items which are not favorable, say meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, these are all unfavorable. And we must be ready to renounce anything, janasanga, lolyam, all these things are unfavorable principles. So these things we should be ready to renounce in Krishna consciousness. Then third, he explains, one should have no other interest other than the interest of the Lord. See, this is another, not that I have my separate interest and also I have some interest for what the Lord has interest in. No. You see, factually, Arjuna, if you see, he had other interest from the interest of the Lord. But after hearing Bhagavad Gita, his interest was completely one with the Lord. So this is how we have to culture our consciousness, that we should try to analyze whether my interest is a separate interest from the Lord, separate interest from my spiritual master. Because how do we know what is the interest of the Lord? Right? We know the interest of the Lord through the mouth of our spiritual master. Just like the other day on Prabhupada disappearance day, we were hearing from Prabhupada himself, isn't it? Prabhupada himself was giving, Prabhupada in that disappearance day of his spiritual master Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that somehow I was able to imbibe that order of my spiritual master. My spiritual master ordered me to push on this Krishna consciousness, and that will do good to me and to others. And Prabhupada is saying, through the same parampara, now I am passing on this message to you. I am passing on this legacy to you, that I may not remain forever. But the same message which is coming in the parampara, now you have understood to a certain extent. Now you should just try to push on this Krishna consciousness movement. You see? So that means what? We have to forego our interest. Our interest may be, either it could be material, it could be labha, it could be puja, it could be pratishtha. I want to become distinct, isn't it? So we should forego all these kinds of separate interest, and we should just take the interest of the spiritual master. That is what we should be doing. And that is how we find Prabhupada. He tried so much with his God brothers. He said, even when Prabhupada became so much famous after coming back from America, Prabhupada still gave that proposal to many of his God brothers to join cooperatively and push on this Krishna consciousness movement. You see? So that is the meaning of having only the interest of the Lord, not bothering about that I want to become famous or this. His whole idea was how Krishna consciousness can be spread. So with this mood also, we should all, be pushing on Krishna consciousness, having only the interest of the Supreme Lord. Another very important factor Rupa Goswami says is, one should be confident of Krishna's protection. So we may face with so many kinds of difficulties in our life. Actually, sometimes devotees become bewildered and they think that, why these difficult situations are coming. When I was in this place, these problems were not there. When, these devotees are there, these situations are there, and we are facing these kinds of problems. But actually these are all whatever we have learned theoretically in our Krishna consciousness. We should always remember that it is the arrangement of the Lord. If the Lord is giving me certain circumstances wherein I can practice more and more dependence on the protection of the Lord, isn't it? I am able to test how far I have advanced in Krishna consciousness, how far I have developed my dependence on the protection of the Supreme Lord. Isn't it? Just like Prabhupada gives an example that when the Kshatriyas are, why are they sent practically? Why it is not only theoretical for Kshatriyas that you learn how to fight in the battle? No. How is the kind of training given to them? They are sent to the forest. They take a sword, they go and challenge. Practically they see whether they are getting trained in that direction or not. Similarly, Krishna consciousness, we should not shy away from difficult situations in our life. When these kind of difficult situations come in our life, we should see that it is a practical ground for me to depend on the Lord. That is where we will be able to see whether I am actually advancing and depending on the Lord or not. Isn't it? Whether I am able to remember Krishna or not. I have been saying, in all circumstances I should remember Krishna. Now when all these difficult situations came, whether I was able to remember Krishna, that is what we should be able to see. So, one should be confident of Krishna's protection. Another important principle, the fifth principle, Rupa Goswami gives is exclusively to be dependent on the Lord. Not dependent on my plans, not dependent on bank balance, not dependent on position, not dependent on this or that. No. Exclusively, devotee should be dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even for his maintenance. Devotee is not dependent on normal course of action for his maintenance. And the final is, sixth principle he gives is to be always meek and humble, to always feel ourselves to be very meek and humble in front of the Lord. And Prabhupada quotes, with that important principle about from Srimad Bhagavatam, that how a devotee is always meek and humble in any situation of his life. So Prabhupada quotes this verse, Tatte anukampa susamikshamanam bhunjan evatma kratam vipakam. Prabhupada says this should be the guiding principles for devotees in Krishna consciousness. This verse, Prabhupada says, should be the guiding principle for devotees in Krishna consciousness. What is the meaning? Tatte anukampam susamikshamana. He has to train his mind. Susamikshamana means what should be the consciousness when problem comes in his life. See, this is beautifully describing, Bhagavatam is describing. He should always wait for anukampa. He should be always waiting for Krishna's mercy. That should be the state of his mind. Tatte anukampa susamikshamanam. Susamikshamanam means this is how a devotee should receive problems in his life. And then bhunjan evatma kritam vipakam. Another very important principle which is always devotee should practice practically in our life. You see, all these principles are meant for practice. These are not theoretical principles. We all say, when problem comes in our life, don't point to others, right? Generally what we do, we always look, he is the cause of my problem. Today, I am not advancing in spiritual life because of this devotee. Very inimical towards me. He's been giving me problems left and right. From beginning he's been behind me. Always trying to show me down, isn't it? Always giving me trouble. So, but actually, this is how we should be cultivating our consciousness, not in this direction. That is not devotee's consciousness. Devotee will never pinpoint this devotee, this is the cause, this situation is the cause for my problem. Bhagavatam is teaching us the most important principle. Bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam. Bhunjana means tolerate. Why tolerate? Evatma kritam vipakam. It is my own doing. Somebody is becoming an instrument. That's all. We should understand. Some devotee is giving me trouble or somebody is giving me trouble. It is only an instrument. Instrument is not the cause. That is what we should understand. What is the real cause? Real cause is Evatma kritam vipakam. It is Atma kritam vipakam. It is my own doing. I have done so many nonsense in my past life because of which today I have to suffer. The devotee, this devotee or this person may be just an instrument in the hand. That's all. So, devotee does not point out, he is the cause, this situation is the cause of my problem. No. He always understands the cause is my own misdeeds. That is the cause. So what does he do? Tolerates. Bhunjana. And what should be his consciousness while tolerating? So further it says, Hritavagavapubhir vidhan namaste. With his heart, with his words, and with his body. He's completely dedicated to the service of the Lord. So in spite of facing all these kinds of troubles, all this kind of problem, he is neither cursing the Lord, he is neither cursing the situation, he is not pinpointing this is the cause. He understands this is my own doing. He tolerates, and not only he tolerates, with his heart, with his words and with his body, he is still completely dedicated to the Supreme Lord. Jivetaya. If one lives his life like this, then he becomes Saiva Daivak. He becomes eligible candidate for Krishna's mercy. So this is the very important principles which Srila Rupa Goswami has given, which one should cultivate how to surrender to the Supreme Lord. So we'll stop with this Granthra, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.